Hi, thanks for having me here. Thank you to October for allowing me to fill in for Shana Kimball. So I'm talking about social media with authors, and I publish in the areas of information science, communications, internet studies, history of science, history of technology, and social studies of science. And a lot of my authors they use social media with varying degrees of frequency. The historians of science, not as much, whereas the internet studies people, obviously, they're the big people that do this. So there's a range of activity that goes on here. But what I've noticed from watching this is, and this is something I want to sort of complicate the idea here with, is if we consider actually what scholarly publishing is, and we actually think of that as what is it that we're actually doing. So in its purest form, I would say scholarly publishing is connecting individual readers with relevant content. And as scholars publish their work to communicate their ideas, they often see this as promoting their own work to others. So this differentiation that we make and they make is not quite as large. It's kind of more of the same thing for them. So this actually isn't too far from the idea of marketing to individuals, if you think about it that way. So consider scholarship as the original social media, because I think that's kind of what we're looking at. The big factor with this is that with social media, what we're considering social media now is that it's technology-based, right? So technologies are always differentially adopted, and as new technologies and cultural practices emerge, we have to evolve and sort of capture this moving target. And that's always the trick for us as publishers, right? So let's think that the world looks pretty different now than it did 25 years ago or even 10 years ago. This landscape it's global now, and access is uneven. Interdisciplinarity is growing, and the social media practices that we have are things that authors really use to close this gap. So if we look at sort of traditional media versus social media, communication is no longer a one-to-many channel, but a many-to-many channel or a person-to-person channel. Social media is inherently participatory. And what does this actually mean for publishing? As this is what my authors tend to think about, and this is what they ask me about. So I think what we're looking at is publishing changing in a lot of ways as our modes of communication are changing. So Twitter is a great example of how this is happening. So you have Twitter, and so Twitter I think is maybe overrepresented in our world here, because about 15% of Americans are on Twitter right now. So that's not a huge number, obviously. That's I'm not sure actually how I click on this link.
I can't prove it. So what do you want to do?
I just want to click on the link that's there. If we go back. Thank you. Oh, all right. All right, it's all right. All right, well, everyone's surely seen Twitter before, which we can't get online to see. So Twitter is a microblogging platform, which we have. How many of you are on Twitter, first of all? Good number, excellent, okay. So as you know, Twitter will challenge your ability to write something very concise with 140 characters, right? So with Twitter, we have authors they're communicating their ideas as well as their research ideas as well as their marketing ideas. And this is a really interesting thing to watch, because the authors aren't really seeing this as much of they're not seeing the difference that we're seeing as publishers. And that's something we really need to think about as publishers. As more of the way people are communicating their ideas are moving onto these sorts of platforms. So if we think about how this has changed, we want to think about how our communication patterns have changed. So if we look at technology and cultural practices are the major factor here. So we have, and I am going somewhere with this, so please be patient. So we're looking at things like the internet and telecommunications, right? So the internet is how we communicate, how we get online. It's a standard open protocol for communication, though not without its difficulties, obviously. And we have telecommunication platforms, which are also standard open protocols. These are the ways that people are going to access all information moving forward. This is when we talk about a global world, this is where things are going. This is where our content needs to be. So ubiquitous devices are also what's making this possible. So we're moving to a state where everyone can not only read on a mobile device, but they can also participate in the conversation. And that's really important with this, with social media, and I would argue scholarly communication. The global population is not, we have 15% of people on Twitter right now in the US, and majority of you are on smartphones, right? I don't know if the last time you tried to use Twitter on a flip phone, but it's really challenging. I don't know if anyone's still trying to do that, but it's, I was listening to someone give a talk at Microsoft Research a few weeks ago, and they had never experienced that, and they didn't understand why certain usage patterns with text existed, and we were trying to explain that it wasn't a given that you actually were able to get online with the phone, and that was really revelatory to them, which is also scary. So if we think about, but the majority of people who are going to be using these platforms aren't going to have the phones that we have. The majority of people are going to have a stripped down version of a phone, which is, if you think about a netbook, which gives you access to the internet and allows you to do a few things, versus an actual laptop that has a large amount of computing power, those are two very different things, but they provide you with some of the same services. That's what you're going to be looking at. And those are the kinds of platforms you want to think about as to how you're going to allow your content to be. But let's see, so where am I? Okay, so we have the ubiquitous devices, we have our technology, and we have, I think it's important with Twitter. Twitter is a good example of why we don't need to be overly complex about something. In fact, Twitter is a great example of how simple is better. So for communicating scholarly ideas, this is something that authors have also latched onto. The other half of this is the cultural practices, and this is where the participation and collaboration and open access are big factors. A lot of authors I have would consider open access as a marketing tool, and that's a conceptual shift for us, I think, as publishers to think about. But that's really how they see that, and they see that line as very different than what we do. So the participation and collaboration facets are hugely important with how we're looking at scholarship and what our authors want to do. So authors, they're considering OA as a way to communicate their research, and that's a case I will try to make occasionally with my publisher, but it doesn't always work. But so where this leaves us is everything is participatory and collaborating. So we have Twitter, we have blogs, we have Facebook, we have citation tools like Mendeley and Zotero, we have annotation platforms, we have open access publishing, and we have tools like Social Book. So how will authors be able to use these, and how can we facilitate this as publishers? What we're trying to do at the press is at the MIT Press at least, is try to incorporate these more into our publications. So we're trying to bring these streams of thought together and maybe close that gap between marketing with a capital M and actually publication and content. That line, again, looking from the perspective of authors is of course, not quite as big, but for us, we think of these conceptually differently. And that's something that I think we want to think about. You might want to think about changing to a degree. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that are not going to be useful, like the tenure and promotion committees, the different modes of publication. These are all greatly challenging, but things as publishers, if we want to continue publishing in this space, we need to think about. The other thing to think about is platforms and thinking about content on a platform level. So we have new things that are coming out, like O'Reilly's Atlas platform, which Tim O'Reilly didn't actually talk about in his keynote, which is quite interesting, but we did talk about it at dinner the other night, if you were there for our conversation. But what that is, it's actually an annotation and participation platform. So if you what O'Reilly's Atlas platform does is it actually combines all of these things. It combines the participation and the collaboration of the author, of the readers, and it loops this into a seamless publication process. So this is, he, being usually smart and ahead of the curve, has done exactly this thing that I'm trying to communicate to you, that he's already folded these things into this process. And I don't think he would consider that marketing to a degree at all, but that's the content that you have. So he's already closing that gap in a way. And I guess the open access thing is one I just want to ask people to think about as to how to think of this as marketing. This is, I think the lines get drawn in a very polarized way with this subject, and I think to try to understand how authors are thinking about this as a way of promoting their work is hugely important. They don't quite see that it's not they don't see it in the same way as a publisher does, and trying to demonstrate the value that publishers add to this process is hugely important and vital for us to keep doing what we are. So what I have, we have Twitter. Actually, I can't get online, so I can't show you what I was going to show you. Well, all right, so here's Mendeley and Zotero. So if you're not familiar with these annotation platforms, does everyone have a Zotero or Mendeley account? Anyone? Do your authors use these? Have you? Anyone? Yes, excellent. Okay. There's a huge amount of marketing benefit that can come from this in terms of sharing author citations, and then again, it depends on the community that your authors are with. All right. Well, so that's that. So I guess I have. I didn't want to just go through some slides of content about Twitter and whatnot, but I'm happy to post those things. But I just wanted to try to engage a bigger conversation about what participation and collaboration are, and how to just try to get people to think about the difference between, or the not so much of the difference between, what we're doing as marketing and what scholarship is actually in the eyes of the authors, as they're really not as far apart as I think we might think that they are.